Alright, Fontaine has been out for some time now, and I'm sure some of you have at least, or maybe have already finished the World Quest series. Even if you didn't, don't worry about it. It won't be a requirement here, and I can assure you, if you haven't done it and are a little intimidated about it because of the previous World Quest, it's not as long as the Khaenri'ah quest. Cause, God, that quest was 9 hours. 9 hours. But thankfully, the other ones aren't, so thank God. However, if you did every quest but still can't figure out what really happened and why this is here and why that's here, we are here to help. Due to the free World Quests and Fontaine holding much importance to the lore, this is going to be a 3-part series explaining the whole story hidden in the World Quest, as well as adding some theories based on the info we have so far. For a quick disclaimer, we will include a summary timeline and also theories. So for a quick mention, this is all just for fun, and it is not to be taken seriously if maybe some things are incorrect or if this comes off as incorrect in the end once we learn more information in the future. If we did miss anything or you have a different take, you can share it with us in the comments, and we would love to hear what you have to say. So let's get straight into this. We will start off with our first part, and this will involve a discussion behind the two energies in Fontaine, Pneuma and Ousia. It does sound strange to get into those first, but trust me, this will correlate with the lore of Fontaine as we move on. Pneuma and Ousia. That's some interesting names for sure, but what do they really mean? Where did they come from into that? And most importantly, why are they only in Fontaine as of now and not in other regions? We have the 7 elements, like Animo, Geo, Electro, etc. And they come from the Greek words of said elements used and originate from Celestia as blessings from the gods, but that's more as visions. As for the origin from the elements themselves, it could be from the elemental dragons before the primordial one. But for Pneuma and Ousia, we've only heard of this until now. What if we were to think ahead of ourselves and say this could all be connected to khaenri'ah, Celestia, and Abyss? Who knows? But we'll just have to look into it. Before I get ahead of myself with this, let's start from the very beginning. Starting off, we should ask ourselves, what do the two energies mean? Well, in-game, explained by HoYoverse, both energies are properties contained in the life forms, such as earth, air, and watery veins of Fontaine. As for the meaning behind them, they come from ancient Greek similar to the 7 elements. Pneuma is an ancient Greek word for breath and, in religious context, for spirit or soul. Pneuma, air in motion, breath and wind, is equivalent to the material monism in Anaximenes to air as the elements from which all else originated. This usage is the earliest extant occurrence of the term in philosophy. A quotation from Anaximenes observes that just as our soul, aka psyche, being air, holds us together, so do breath, aka pneuma, and air encompasses the whole world. In this early usage, air and pneuma are synonymous. Basically, what this means is that it's an element of all existing life or where the life came from. Now, we can look at Ousia. The term Ousia is also from ancient Greek, but it's a noun. This is formed on the feminine present principle of the verb meaning to be, or I am. This is similar grammatically to the English noun being or true being, and even body. There was no equivalent grammatical formation in Latin, and it was translated to essentia or substantia. In theology, it's also referred to as the essential nature or substance of God. So, in razor terms, Pneuma means soul and Ousia means body or being. The terms itself is interesting to think about when you look at the meanings, but if you think about it, isn't soul and body something that is essential to all life? It's basically the physical state of a person. Body and soul is like a spiritual part of our body. So in this case, why do they exist separately? This could be related to a past event for this to occur, and for the energies to exist. But to try and answer this question, we need to look at how energies manage to exist in the game. If we refer back to the information HoYoverse told us, bringing the two energies together would cause collision and even annihilation of different products and energies. But due to this collision, it powers up all the mecha in Fontaine. Ultimately, these energies should be balanced, but for some reason, they become unstable and separate. The irony of that. They made it clear these energies were vines of the life forms in Fontaine. But in this case, the origin of these energies is what's going to help us understand what really happens. If you look closely at both of them, don't they remind you of something? If you guessed light and abyssal energy, then you are correct. The kind of solidify this idea, it's important to note that these devices scattered around Fontaine have a triqueous symbol on which symbolizes higher power or Celestia and its gods. It's also present on some ancient ruins and even Mora. But I'm sure by now a lot of you are familiar with this symbol. Along with these devices, the energies are also present on visions as well, with that elemental glow. For example, Ousia energy on Lynette, and Pneuma energy on Lene. Now, let's look at each energy a bit closer, starting with Pneuma. If we assume that Pneuma indeed connected with the power of light, or the light element, that would make it an energy of celestial origin. Since light is the element that combines every element, it's basically how prisms work, and this is important because if you look closely on the Pneuma block out in the wild, you will notice the rainbow effect. Light was also the original power of our twin, and the power that powered the Dainichi Mikoshi in Enkanomiya, which was constructed with the wisdom and knowledge of Istaroth or the God of Time, or, as some are familiar with, one of the shades of the Primordial One. If you remember this information, this was around the time of 2.5 for the Free Realms event, and this was when we got the Light Realm sigils there when exploring, and knowing some people right now, they might not be familiar with this. Usually, the power of light is presented to us as this light yellow gold light, which we saw on multiple occasions. For example, like when we fought the Unknown God, helped save Leeway during the first chapter of the OriYin quest, and even when we met Dainsleif in the chasm, while the Abyss Lectors were performing some cleansing ritual. Since some philosophers in ancient Greek were referring to Pneuma as the element from which all else originated, it's safe to assume it has the same origin as the power of light, or the origin per se. Now, for Ousia, it has more of a purple color which is too similar to the abyssal power. Obviously, this power originated from the Abyss or Void Realm. In the book we find in Enkanomiya, Before Sun and Moon, it is implied that a Light Realm and a Void Realm existed in a diametric opposition to each other. The Primordial One created the human realm after defeating the 7 sovereigns of the Light Realm, subjugating both nature and those of the Light Realm who haven't escaped into the ocean. Basically, this dark power was always opposed to light power. The clear example of that power is the opposite defiled statue in the quest Will Be Reunited. This will also include the celestial nail in the chasm and so on. Since these powers are complete opposites to one another, it makes sense why everything powered with feminine Ousia in Fontaine at some point becomes disbalanced and unstable. But if this source of energy is unstable, why did people decide to use it? We have never thought on the origins of these two energies due to their meaning being soul and body technically, but as for why people even use this energy in the first place, this brings us to the next part. So, on to the next part from here. That's definitely something to talk about. This is a question that's been on the mind for a bit, and that is, why are these energies only in Fontaine as of now? Why not in any other region? And why haven't they been showing us? To try and answer this question, we need to dive deep into Fontaine's story. And yes, the pun was not intended. For this, we will look specifically into the history of the Institute of Natural Philosophy and a secret society known as Nazazenkreuz Institute, or Arden Nazazenkreuz. Later on, you may be completely unfamiliar with the name if you haven't played the World Quest featuring this group, or if you didn't recognize this earlier on back in 3.6 with the artifact set named Streams. Originally, it was an organization in Fontaine which was established to raise orphans and the children of criminals. It is prominent for being involved in the lives of many major Fontaine figures during and after the Cataclysm 500 years ago. The institute was led by an unnamed Oceanid as its director, hence the name of Nymph in the artifact set, and Basil Ilton as its vice director. Ryan the Projector, Jacob, Alan, and Mary Ann were the noticeable kids in the institute. Rain and Jacob's parents were likely killed during the siege of Poison, while Alan and Mary Ann's origin were taken in by a friend of their mother, Emile Guillotine. If you did the quest, the Nazazenkreuz adventure, some of these names might ring a bell for you, but we'll talk more about these people in part 3 of the summary, so stay tuned for that. After the events which happened 500 years ago, not only did Fontaine lose their Archon in the desert, as mentioned in the prior World Quest, but the whole nation suffered from the Great Flood. Rain and Jacob went on an expedition to the Griddle of the Sands to research other energy sources to prevent another disaster. In fact, if you go to the location where the Institute has been submerged underwater, you can find multiple devices and constructs from King Deshret in the desert as well as some khaenri'ah machines. So, as Rain was investigating khaenri'ah ruins, he was also making some notes. You can find these notes after completing the prior World Quest. You know which one. And as for these notes, it's called Ryan's Investigation Notes, and they looked at khaenri'ah and Azote. In this notes, he says, compared to the power of the elements, the the power of khaenri'ah is actually more similar to redact. It simulates whatever materials and energy it comes into contact with. Though the khaenri'ah is opposed to the energy of redact, it does similarly have a form of self-recognition. With the new information we got in the new update before 3.6, we can actually fill in the blanks here now. To refer back to the same sentence for the blanks, quote, is actually more similar to light, though the khaenri'ah is opposed to the energy of abyss. If you did the quest as mentioned again, you most likely remember these green creatures all around the underground ruins. This is the khaenri'ah, spiritual powers that are capable of purifying abyssal energy and forbidden knowledge, which are tied with Nabu Malikata, or the goddess of flowers, a name I'm sure we are all familiar with. In the artifact sect, Verukasha's glow, she calls khaenri'ah my pure daughter. To put down the information, it's a pure energy which is opposed to abyss energy, aka a variation of light energy. Now going back to reading his notes, he was also talking about azote, which was a pure source of energy taken straight from ley lines, supposedly the power Khaenri'ah people originally planned to use to power up agricultural machines, but it was also the power which was used in all ruined golems. In the end, Rin was unimpressed because after all, he wanted to find the energy with will, as he called it. In some of the documents left by Khaenri'ahs, it was evident that they were trying to combine two opposed energies, that being light and abyss, to create a more powerful source of energy. That's why the comparison of khaenri'ah and light power is more important here. After collecting the data, he thought that the mission went successfully and returned to Fontaine. Although he kept one secret project to himself, he did report his findings to Alan. As for the secret project, we will discuss this in depth in part 3 of the summaries. After this, they had a fallout because of that said secret project, and Alan didn't want to participate in any of this. He left the Nazis-Kreuz Institute and established Fontaine Research Institute. And this institute was dedicated to studying machines and energy, where he made a huge breakthrough regarding energy sources. This is where he looked into Pneuma and Ousia energies, and by doing so, he was able to power up mecha now. The idea of the power for the mecha was already discussed here, so that's where the energy source came from. In the notes, there is a mention that this energy has always been regarded as the latest threat, and not as a potential resource. It's important to note as well that Pneuma and Ousia energies specifically were natives to the Fontaine ecosystem as well, as said in ancient notes in the Book of Revelation. That's why research done by Khaenri'ahs made it possible for people of Fontaine to try and utilize it, though the main reason why they appeared in Fontaine in the first place remains to be seen. Perhaps it has something to do with the ancient kingdom Lemuria. But this is a theme for another video. In conclusion of all of this, could the source of energy of this research be connected to khaenri'ah, Celestia, and Abyss? This might be a lot to digest at first, especially if you haven't read the lore yourself. It's a bit of a gap from 3.0 information and to 4.0. But with this video here, let's summarize what we have learned so far. From the first part of learning of the energy's meaning in ancient Greek, Pneuma means soul and Ousia means body or being. For the origins of Pneuma and Ousia, these energies most likely have celestial and abyss origins, which naturally are completely opposed to one another. As said in the Book of Revelation, these energies were native to the Fontaine's water, land, and even living beings, but the reason why they appeared here is unknown as of now. Alan Gillantine, using the information which was collected by Rien de Perchiker during his expedition in khaenri'ah ruins in the desert, he was able to make a breakthrough with this information and utilize the annihilation between Pneuma and Ousia to power up all mecha in Fontaine. And with that, this seems to be it as of now for the information behind Pneuma and Ousia, as well as the first part of our 3-part series for Fontaine lore. This one is a bit short, but we wanted to keep it short and sweet instead of cramming everything in one go. In the next part, we will talk about Elinas, including the birth and the lore behind the Melazine, and on top of that, the people who were involved in some secret experiments with his remains. I'm sure by now, with the small details we have seen, a lot of people are curious about what really happened with him, and on top of that, why some people from the Nazis-Kreuz Institute were so drawn to him. We will have to explain that next time, but for now, we will see you soon in part 2.